Well, baby, you've been on my mind. I think about you all the time. Oh, I want to see your face. That don't make me wait.
Welcome back to Sleeping Around the podcast. We are still in Austin, Texas.
Yes, we are.
And we're so blessed. We're in the Omni downtown Austin.
Yes.
Our next guest, and I have always wanted to have a private chef. Robbie actually wears a SomnoMed device called the Avant. And we connected through my company, but actually through social media. We just started going back and forth. And the first thing he said, he goes, man, I love the Avant so much. I want to help. And I go, well, I happen to have a podcast with Dr. Ann Morris.
Yeah.
So our guest today is Robbie Rensel, private chef.
I am.
Out of Houston, Texas.
Yes.
And you are just such a joy to follow on social media. You have the best attitude, positive messages. I felt like we're brothers. You know how I put out like a message every day?
Yes.
This
And what's his handle? What's your handle for?
It's just Robbie Rensel.
Robbie
Yep,
Rensel.
that's my name.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Is that
awesome.
how the kids say it, the handle?
Yeah, it's the handle.
I thought that was like CB talk.
No.
You know what my handle was when we had CBs?
I don't know.
Thunderloins. I'm just kidding. So Robbie and I started going back and forth. I actually introduced him to Lewis.
Okay.
You know Lewis.
Yep.
Lewis and him started talking, and Lewis loves him. And so we were able to get him fitted again, to get another Avant. We'll get into your story of why you go through so many Avants.
Yep.
Okay.
But it's such a joy to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And you wore your chef top?
I did
Yeah.
wear my chef jacket.
So how does one become a private chef? You could start anywhere you want, but how does one become a private chef?
Okay, so my girlfriend's always like, you tell this same story, but it's like so
No,
true.
But
So
now we have all new listeners, all new
Yeah.
watchers.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've known exactly what I want to do when I was 15 years old.
Awesome.
So in my family, you had a car and a job, and I happen to be in one of the only towns in Michigan that has a 5-diamond resort.
Okay.
And so, I was like, I like to cook, and I need a job. My brothers had a job doing IT, like event setup at this 5-diamond hotel. I was like, hey, that's a good start. So he went to, the kitchen. He's like, hey, I don't have a job for you, but you can do everything that no one else wants to do. So, right. So like dishes,
Yeah.
sweeping
Sure.
floors, peeling garlic, like all the terrible jobs, cutting onions.
Sure.
And, at that point in time, I was paid $650, working 100 hours a week. And I was
Sure.
like, oh, they really invested in me. And I was like, no, just like the cheapest, best labor they had,
Right.
like
Sure.
looking back.
Sure.
But my dad's an entrepreneur. My grandpa's an entrepreneur. So I always knew that I wanted to set my own destiny because, you really don't get paid very well in like a commercial kitchen,
Sure.
no matter how high up you are. And you just don't have a good lifestyle like whatsoever.
Sure.
So I knew if I, spent 15 to, however long, I could set my own destiny, both financially and scheduling. And I
Sure.
wanted to have a family. And, that's just kind of how I built my entire life and this goal. And I'm kind of to that goal right now and
Got it.
this tipping point with everything that we do. But, that's kind of how I became. And I always worked in luxury. So I always worked in 5-diamond resorts. I always
Sure.
worked in private chef aspects. And I just like the art and the complication. And, food's one of those things that everyone's got their natural ability.
Sure.
And food just makes sense. Like
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
like an encyclopedia of food because it just sticks, right?
Sure.
Like concepts, and there's such, there's chemistry, there's
Yes.
art, there's so many things that has to do with food. And it's such a complicated process because if you think about a dish getting to a customer, you got to source the product, you got to cook the product, you got to, prep it, you got to cook it, and then you got to serve it, but then you
Sure.
got to get it served to the customer in a good food quality, and then
Sure.
you have the whole service aspect.
I
So-
think it is totally an art form.
It
Yeah.
is 1,000%.
That's why I wanted to meet you. And I'm like, gosh, just this passion. Unfortunately, I grew up and I played a lot of sports. And although I had jobs, I never worked in the restaurant industry until my master's degree. And then I was just a server.
Yeah.
And it was a 5-star, but I didn't even go back and truly appreciate what our chef was doing.
Right.
And so I look at it totally as a calling.
Yeah.
And equally as an art form as my friends who can sing, play guitar,
Oh, yeah.
paint, because
And even potentially more of an art form because you have to adapt
oh yeah,
to so many different things.
100%.
And as an artist of like whether I'm an artist painting or I'm making music, like I create what exactly my style, right? but I don't necessarily have to adapt to anyone else. This is my style.
Right.
Chefs have to figure out what their style is,
Right.
but then infuse it with so many other people's
Yeah.
styles and inspirations, and even be able to evolve it based on what restaurant or what event.
Oh, I
And
can't.
so,
I
I
get
mean-
so many like because I got into raw food a year ago.
Yeah.
And then learning how I met these amazing chefs that knew how to make raw food. Because I loved tartare, steak
Yeah.
tartare, and there was this amazing restaurant down in the Rio Grande Valley that I just loved, and it was the traditional. It was really, and just the lime cooking and then the quail egg, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to my point though.
There was a
That
point
is
in there?
the passion that you have, and it is a gift. And so, what I want our audience to see and maybe take away from this, of course, we'll talk about sleep, but you knew from 15, peeling and doing all that stuff, washing dishes, that this is where you would be in food.
Yeah. I mean, it's really
Wow.
surprising. Not
No,
a lot
no.
of like young people have,
Yes.
We've
this
talked to a
vision.
CEO about this. We've
Yeah.
talked to doctors about it. Some people just know.
Yeah,
Yes.
it came naturally. I loved it. Being a chef is really interesting in the sense that think about an artist painting a masterpiece,
Sure.
but doing it under pressure
Yes.
in an hour.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
and then hanging it, make sure it's straight. And,
Yes. Yeah.
if you compare it to that, you're like, oh, that would take a lot of,
Yeah.
Right.
craziness.
Yeah.
But
It's like Chopped every single day.
yeah, it's like chopped every
That's a
single
good
day.
shit. My daughter used to love that.
Yeah.
But people don't realize it's not even just a dinner. It's thinking about it, doing the menu. We customize the menus to every single client. So it's not
Wow.
like you just pick from a menu.
Yeah.
And that's part of being, a luxury private chef. It's customized
Yes.
to the clients. And sometimes I'm making stuff that I've never ever made before.
Wow.
And I formulate it in my head from a taste, from a smell, from a
Sure.
presentation standpoint.
And I presume you practice that before the big event.
no.
Wow. So you're just like, never did it. You're my experiment.
But I think
Yeah,
that's the
and
calling.
I can build
But
it
yeah.
in my head.
That's
So
the
I
gift.
know exactly what it's going to taste
That's
like. I know,
amazing.
so I can formulate all that.
Yeah.
But
So you are a cooking savant. You are literally.
I wouldn't say that. I've just had a lot of, right? It's the 10,000 hour
Sure.
rule, so I
Sure.
probably have my 20 or 30,000 hours in.
Sure.
So that's 10,000 hours when you start to really kind of get it.
Sure.
But, working 100 hours a week in
Sure.
just high school I got my 10,000 hours in before I even
100%.
went to culinary school.
Well,
Yeah.
let's start there. Where did you go to high school at?
I in Michigan, little
Okay.
small town in northern Michigan called Petoskey, big tourist town, and so that's why they kind of had a 5-diamond resort is
Sure.
because
Right.
it's beautiful. It's right on the bay of Lake Michigan,
Sure.
and there's a lot of very very wealthy people because like that place you'd never suspect would be that vacation,
Right.
beautiful,
Yes.
and it's kind of like. There's so many flowers and
Oh, I've been there.
it's small town.
I
and
know. I know where you're talking.
yeah,
about.
a lot of character and all that. So it was, it's boring as a kid, but then you go back as an adult, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is amazing.
Yes.
So
Yes. And so then after high school, is it going directly into culinary school? Is that how it typically the
yeah,
process
so
is?
I went to New York to the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde
Yeah.
Park.
Okay.
So I have a 4-year degree from there, and I don't come from a wealthy family. My mom worked
Sure.
3 jobs to get me to the Culinary Institute of
Wow.
America because
Wow.
she was like, "You've dedicated your whole life up until this point. Like, I want you,
To be
to go to
successful.
the best school possible."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that is a world class
yes,
training.
Yeah.
And so that was going to be one of my questions for you is because there are some chefs who they may not have taken a formal route and then are still very successful. But I do think that it probably gave you kind of that leg up of really learning a very specific expertise, skill set from really incredible chefs. So what was the experience like for going through Culinary Institute of America?
it was really interesting. I was very, very lucky to 6 months in, the oldest, biggest club on campus was called the Gourmet Society. And I happened to I call it being the guy, where you show up, early, you stay
Yeah.
late.
Yeah.
You're that guy
Yeah.
for, and I was that guy for the president of the Gourmet Society. Only club on campus that had their own separate budget that didn't, was independently managed.
Sure.
The advisor was a certified master chef. And
Wonderful.
so 6 months in, I was the president of that club because the
Wow.
other president was on his way out and he nominated me.
Oh,
So
wow.
for 3.5 years, I basically ran a business inside of the Culinary Institute of America.
That's amazing.
And if any famous people came in, Gourmet Society hosted them.
That is incredible.
So,
That is
yeah.
incredible.
All
And
right,
you know
you
what's
good.
so funny
Go
is
ahead.
that I always tell people it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
And so really the advantage that you're describing is the networking, right?
Yeah,
And
because
so
I started my LinkedIn when I was like 18, first in culinary school, or 19, first
That's
in culinary
amazing.
school. And I mean, I was really, really shy. I had to force myself
Really?
to talk to people, like make an active, effort.
Yes.
Yeah. Like I would go around to the offices of all the faculty and just introduce myself. And I was like, I probably look so stupid, but
No.
everyone was super supportive, and I'd meet billionaires, and I was like, freaking out, like way
Yes.
to drink with the fire hose, right?
Yes, exactly. And it's so funny because I reflect on our conversations with Greg Friedman from Peachtree, the CEO of Peachtree, and it really was the same thing. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, is what
yeah.
he stated.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's the recurring theme of that. What leads to success? It's taking opportunities, taking chances, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, and then also being resilient, right? So adapting to change and being able to kind of
Well, like
put
doing
yourself
it over and
And
over.
that's what I was gonna say,
And
the
just be like,
10,000 hours.
I'm just going to be uncomfortable for the rest of my life.
Who was the most famous person that came in during those 3.5 years when you were running it?
Ferran Adria of El Boulé.
Should I know who that is?
I don't
So El Boulé is the one, if you ever heard like modernist cuisine or
Yes.
you
Okay.
know, that very science-based,
Yes,
like
yes,
out
yes.
of this world. He's a Spanish chef that, I mean,
Okay.
was the one who really led that whole thing. And
Got it.
he was named best restaurant in, the entire world for 5-6 years until he shut
wow.
it down.
Oh, wow.
Because it was so expensive to run, because, I mean, you have like 50 people because the food is so complicated.
Sure.
I mean, he flew in on a helicopter. I mean, he's like the most famous chef that,
Oh, wow.
ever was. And, yeah, so that was probably the most famous person.
And pressure.
Yeah.
And what did he think of your guys' efforts?
Or you? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of a co-host type thing where
Right.
a lot of the CMCs, because there's about 20 CMCs or more that were at
CMC
the school,
means culinary-
certified master chef.
Got
So
you.
it's the highest level of certification a
Got
chef
you.
can have. So it was a lot of my people were helping, and I was helping, but they were kind of leading the charge
Sure.
because it was such a
High profile.
incredible, high profile,
Wow.
type thing. And I don't think he speaks like either English or like really good because he's from Spain.
Sure.
So there was some translation stuff there.
Oh,
too,
very
so.
cool.
So did he do the old thumbs up, thumbs down? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So after 4 years, and that's New York, did you stay up there? Was there opportunities to become just a private chef for one of these billionaires?
So I went to Houston. I wanted to really find the perfect job, and I was willing to wait for exactly the right fit.
Right.
Because what I, realized is some people get stuck in a job right out of culinary school, and they
Yeah.
stay there for 5 years just
Yes.
because like that's what they know.
Exactly.
And that's what they fall into.
They
And
get comfortable,
Exactly.
right?
They get
Yeah.
comfortable, and it's easy.
Yes.
And knowing my path of, entrepreneurship, I knew that I had to structure it properly in order to get where I wanted to be.
Got it. Got it.
And, Houston's a great
I
city
love that you
and
chose
diverse
Houston.
and
Yeah.
I love that you chose Houston.
yeah, great economy for the
yeah.
most part, pretty stable, insulated from a lot
Sure.
of the
Different things throughout the country.
And,
Yeah.
and you're going
Absolutely.
to get, obviously the oil field is huge. You still, the engineering side, you still have, that makes me happy. Out of all the places you chose to come to Houston, Texas. So
Yeah,
that makes
yeah.
me happy. I want to dive into your OSA,
Okay.
obstructive sleep apnea.
Yeah.
And did you, around that time when you moved to Houston, were you having sleep issues then?
Well, I'm
So-
sure as a chef, you have amazing sleep
Yeah,
every night, right?
I'm like the preeminent expert on like how to be the most terrible sleep patient like ever.
Well, let's jump in. This is perfect.
So like 8 years, 9 years. I mean, I got blood tests because I was just exhausted all the time.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what I,
Daytime
what I did,
sleepiness,
10 hours of sleep, 11 hours, eat healthy, didn't matter.
Right.
And so I went through blood tests and doctors, and I was like, they're like, you're like perfectly healthy.
Sure.
And then I had a friend, or I think it was a friend that was a doctor. He's like, you probably have sleep apnea because you snore really bad. And
Interesting.
so then I went to got sleep tests. Yeah, I have sleep apnea.
Sure.
And
Do you
then
remember what your AHI was?
no.
Okay.
So that's your breathing number, right? So that's the number of times per hour when you're sleeping that you may either have a stopping of breathing, an apnea.
Yeah.
And really it's kind of a misterm because you don't have to actually have a complete cessation of breathing. There's just at least a 90% reduction, right?
Apnea hypopnea
And then the hypopnea is that we're having a reduction in breathing. And many times that's associated with either a desaturation of only 3%. So if you're 100%, you drop down to 97, but we see your flow of how your breathing is reduced. That's something called a hypopnea. We then calculate how many times you have apnea, hypopnea per hour, and that's your AHI or your breathing number. That's based on if you do an in-lab sleep study, right? If you don't do an in-lab sleep study, you do a home study. We generally
did
are
a home
getting
study.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that generally is then an RDI because you can't be as accurate in judging that hypopnea is because you can't get the EEG.
Did you have a pulse oximetry on?
Yeah, I had like the whole chest thing, and then
Because so we
bunch of
talk about
sensors
O2
and stuff.
saturation is the most important. So where we are today in 2023, AHI is very important to manage care.
Yeah.
But subjectively to our patients, how
Sure.
do they feel? But we definitely want to talk about your O2 levels. So not yours specifically, but that's really
Yeah.
what we need to look into, or SO2, saturated.
Yeah.
So for 8 years, you were on this journey?
Yeah,
Or
I
was
could
it-
not figure out what was going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like exhaustion to
So-
the point of I
So-
just had to push through.
Yeah.
Right?
And so this is such a fascinating point because your journey has
8
led to
years.
obstructive sleep apnea. However, the journey I typically hear that's taking 8 years is not for obstructive sleep apnea. It typically is for narcolepsy or idiopathic hypersomnia. And so excessive daytime sleepiness, many people think it's common or rather that it's normal, but
Yeah,
it's
suck
common.
it up.
It's common, right? So at least 20% of the population has excessive daytime sleepiness, the symptoms that you're describing. That I'm dragging ass, but I'm getting through the day. And if
Drinking
I could
coffee
nap,
all day.
if I could nap, I would. And so many times a person like yourself, they're probably going to a doctor and they're going, well, you're a chef. Of course you're tired.
Yeah.
You're burning that midnight oil. And so just sleep hygiene. Sleep
And it was
hygiene
like
it
a
out.
physical exhaustion.
But I
Yeah.
love that he did he went through the blood work. He did the
Yeah.
EMET. So, and to come out, my first ex-wife almost had that same similar story, like constantly. We could not figure out what it was, and it took a sleep test. Now, hers
Sure.
was in lab, yours was this. So when you get that back and a doctor reads it, they probably went, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did they? Like, you need to get help right now?
Yeah. I mean, it was like I was stopping breathing and,
So
know,
Sure.
probably
it was,
You're probably severe.
yeah, it was bad. And, it's interesting because in food and being a chef, like you work on adrenaline like so much. So like when service hits and, when you're pushing so hard and under a timeline, it doesn't even matter because you're running on adrenaline.
Sure.
So it's, if you're tired, it's like, okay, well, you're just going to push through it. Like there's
Sure.
no other choice.
Sure.
And so I think
just
being
crash
in
later.
that career and being in that environment, it covered up kind of the severity of
Sure.
it.
Sure.
Just because of being in that environment.
Yeah.
And I mean, I got very little sleep when I was working 110
Sure.
hours. I'd go home and, 12 o'clock, be home at 1 and get up at 5 to
Sure.
do, breakfast, brunch, lunch, dinner,
Sure.
close the kitchen
Do
down.
it all over again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do it all over.
Yeah.
So when you find out, you go to the doctor and they say, here's a CPAP. I'm sure that's what they said, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Walk us through.
That was a very positive response.
Walk
you
us
had,
Yeah, I
through.
loved it.
Yeah.
So walk us through that, Robbie. Tell us.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to do the CPAP, I've heard, nightmares about it. I'm going to get the best of the best. I got, like 3 or 4 different masks, try the different masks.
Sure.
But, it doesn't matter what it is when you got this big thing on your face. It's not even that it was uncomfortable, it kept falling off.
Got it.
Because like I sleep on my side
Sure.
and I sleep on like a feather pillow. So my head kind of sinks in.
Sure.
I'd get halfway through the night and it was like off.
What
Or
year?
over
What
here,
year
yeah.
was this?
This was like 3 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I got my Somnomed 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is right before that. And I was like, it's not effective. Can't do it. And I travel sometimes for, work. I was like, can't take it with me.
Sure.
So it's just kind of a moot point. It's
Sure.
almost like it's not even effective enough to use.
Sure.
Was
sure.
someone working with you? And I am curious because my background is CPAP. So was somebody's like trying to help coach you, like behavior modification? Okay, we have different masks. It sounds like they said, let's try this one. Are you trying? Did we check your pressures? Is it too tight? Was someone working with you, or were you kind of on your own?
Yeah, I was kind of on my own.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Truthfully, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there
Okay.
wasn't I'm like a big Googler. So I was like doing my own research and trying
That's
to
always
solve
helpful.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very helpful.
Very accurate information
So
on
I would
Google.
actually disagree with you,
That's
right?
we can
And so
disagree.
the reason I would disagree is because that is one of the biggest platforms that I generally will advocate for is patient empowerment and activation.
Well,
in
we had
their
an
own-
episode about
in their
that.
own self-education journey, right? And so if you are relying purely on your physician or your healthcare system for all the source of information, you are going to be grossly misinformed all the time, right? And so you're correct
point.
that in Google there is going to be misinformation as well. But in fact, when Google has been studied and putting in search terms, 70% of the time, if you put in 3 symptoms, 70% of the time in the first page, it's going to have the right diagnosis, right? And so with that stated, I know physicians who that statistic is better than, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is that when you are in your own healthcare journey and you already have met so many incorrect responses, right? You now have been conditioned by 7 to 8 years of people saying there's nothing wrong with you.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with you.
And they never
Why
said,
can't you
hey,
wear the CPAP?
you might
Yeah.
have sleep apnea. Like never once.
Exactly. And I'll tell you that if you look the same as you do right now,
No,
it's
I was
because
even like skinnier.
yeah, so you didn't fit the phenotype, right?
Right,
You weren't
exactly.
over 50, you weren't morbidly obese.
Your neck's
You're
not over 17.
Exactly. And so therefore you didn't fit the right phenotype for them
Right.
to say this is what you have. And this is so common. We see this in women all the time of that women are constantly misdiagnosed as just insomnia or insufficient sleepers, and they actually have obstructive sleep apnea. And so it is really important that people who are listening to this or watching this, that their call to action is that if you're having the same journey that Robbie had, where you're going to your doctor, I do challenge you to go to the internet and to be able to do your self-education. And you know what? You print out that information, you bring it to your doctor, and you demand a conversation on this is what I'm reading, and it's divergent to what you're stating, and I'm still suffering. How do I get to my best days? Right?
I agree with that.
And so the reality
fair
is
point.
that
I
when
agree with that.
when we start discouraging people from utilizing Google or utilizing resources, we recognize that we are disempowering them from being the leader in their own medical journey. So I do think that it is important. I do think that there's guardrails, right? Because
Right.
there is a
Because
lot of
self-diagnosis is
it's
Like
it's
look
challenging.
at 3 sources. Like my thing is like if 3 sources match,
Yeah.
like it's probably like somewhat legit.
Yeah.
Now if you just read like 1 and you believe that and you take it in, you're like,
well,
you know.
and in all fairness, I've been guilty of this, and maybe someone in our audience has too. I used to be the type of guy that I would just ask the right people till someone agreed with me. So no, yeah, okay. See, I'm right.
Exactly.
But and I agree with you. So let me retract my head movement and all that.
Good.
I think when
good.
we self-diagnose with no action, what you said, what I heard you say,
Yes.
was that if you find something, you print it out, then you take it to
Yes.
your physician and
Yeah.
demand.
Yes.
You used
Yeah.
that word.
Demand.
Demand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because the reality is that this is what I've been encouraging people to say, and you probably have even seen my most recent social media post on this,
Yes.
of that we always talk about the HCP, right? And so what does that refer to? It refers to the healthcare provider, the healthcare professional, right? I think that it needs to be retermed, and it's the healthcare partner, right? Because the patient is the person who's driving the medical mission. We're there as a partner. We're the glorified GPS to provide you options and routes. And so really, again, it is really important for individuals to feel self-empowered because we're recognizing that we're not doing a great job. If we were, you wouldn't have waited 8 years for a
Well, yeah, you have to
diagnosis.
advocate for your own health because I mean, at the end of the
100%.
day, you know how you feel. I mean, the doctor can't read your mind.
No.
You know?
So
No.
when you say I'm not wearing this anymore, so we call that non-compliant or
See, I wasn't
not
even like,
tolerate.
I'm not wearing it. I like tried. And I happened to have a friend that was a dentist, and he was like, dude, have you tried a Somnomed? And he just went to New York or something to get certified in it.
Right.
Sure.
And so I was like, no, but the CPAP sucks. And he's like, let me make you one, and I did a favor for him. So he, cut me a deal.
Sure.
And then I was like, see ya, CPAP, like I'm giving it back, you
Sure,
know? And
sure.
then that's kind of how it started, was just a random conversation with a friend that happened to be a dentist that happened to get certified at the
Sure.
right time.
Sure.
Yeah, that, or I'd probably be on a CPAP still.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like, I'm gonna throw this thing away because it's such a, terrible thing. It was like, I'm desperate to get help. So I'm going to
Sure.
keep this. I'm going to get it
Sure.
right.
Sure.
But then I just serendipitously.
And I think that your specific journey with the CPAP is one that we very much recognize is common. So when we prescribe CPAPs, there are studies that have made the suggestion that people at a month, 3 months, generally the adherence that we're looking at is as low as 30%. And now when we're talking about adherence, the thing that's fascinating is that most people will reflect on CMS guidelines, right? Which is basically saying that you need to use it 4 hours a night, 5 days a week. And I always
Isn't that crazy?
And I always make the analogy of saying that if I were to apply that same mindset to any other medical disease, I would never expect benefit, right? You're diabetic, you should be on metformin 200 milligrams a day. And you're like, well, I took 50 every other day. I don't understand why my hemoglobin A1C is still 12, right? It should be less than 6. And so with that, you wouldn't necessarily see the benefit, but people are trying. And so there are some strategies. So I love the fact that you were asking, was anyone working with you, right? Because at my center for pediatrics, and we work on it also on the adult side, is that we have a CPAP desensitization program to help people like yourself to be able to say, how do we get you to be more comfortable? It is important for people to hear that at this point, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine does recommend PAP as first-line gold standard therapy, right? However, it is increasingly important for not only patients to hear this, but other healthcare partners to hear this, that being able to treat the disorder is important. It's more important than saying I'm only going to use the gold standard. Right. And so when we're looking at that, we now recognize not only do we have dental devices, mandibular advancement devices like the Avant that are going to help in moving the jaw forward, move the tongue forward, which basically opens up the airway. But we also are seeing things like hypoglossal nerve stimulator by Inspire, being able to demonstrate that it not only is very, very effective in adults, we also now have an indication in pediatrics for children who have Down syndrome down to 13 years of age. You now are also even seeing companies creating medications where we have a combination of atomoxetine with oxybutynin that are now in clinical trials as treatment for obstructive sleep apnea.
Well, I was going to say Excite OSA, things, the tongue stimulator.
Exactly. And then also we all are now seeing companies who historically have been in the obesity space with the GLP-1 inhibitors, where they now are also studying the use of those medications for the treatment of OSA. Why? Because we know in patients who are overweight or obese, the only thing that has been shown to be curative is weight loss. And so I am so excited by hearing your journey, because I think that there's probably a lot of people who are identifying with what you're stating.
Well, I had a dual thing, right? Like I was breaking my teeth, grinding, and I had sleep apnea, right? So it's like, if I want to solve it, it's like I got to have a mouth guard and a CPAP. And that's like, that's like dual terrible.
So I'm curious, and I love having I get to have this conversation almost every day, but the first day that you put it in, that you knew it was working.
That's what she said.
This one. The first day you put your oral device in your mouth and you knew it was working. How did that feel?
That's what she said.
I mean, it was like, I can't even describe it. It was like going from literally being up all the time to like, I mean, okay, so it's like black and white, living in black and white, and like the color turned on.
I love that.
Like, so you were literally living in the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I mean, it was terrible. And I was like, wow, this is what this is what life looks like. Like, it wasn't even, it wasn't even like a sleep thing. It was a global change in how I saw the world. I mean, energy, mental clarity, like everything.
Yeah, I'm sure mood as well, because you probably were much more irritable, more likely to be like short in reaction. And one of the other pieces I think is really important to point out, and utilizing his journey as an example, is that there's so much talk about OSA. I mean, that in fact is one of my frustrations, right? Is that when you look at the International Classification of Sleep Disorders, Edition 3, text revision, there's over 70 types of sleep disorders. However, there is a hyperfixation on OSA. And generally, even again, you had even said it on the oxygen desaturation, we actually know that is not the only driver, right? The chronic intermittent hypoxia is one of the drivers, but the sleep fragmentation, the autonomic instability that comes with OSA is the other driver for all those other adverse outcomes, including your fatigue and sleepiness and irritability and all these other pieces. But the part that I want to highlight is that when you have a person who has OSA, it is really important to recognize that the majority of people have OSA, That's not the only sleep disorder they have.
I agree.
Right? And so you've already clearly highlighted it. I have insufficient sleep syndrome due to decreased opportunity, right? It's not that you have insomnia, you have decreased opportunity. If I'm only allowing myself to lay in bed for 5 hours, you're not going to get 8 hours of sleep. That math just doesn't work.
Yep.
However, you also have bruxism, which is highly comorbid with obstructive sleep apnea. And there's so many theories around why those two go together. But also, there's not enough study to even say, does bruxism drive a worsening of your OSA? So if you think about it, he's already described it. I'm grinding. When you grind down your teeth, right, you now are creating a smaller airway, a more collapsible airway. In addition to that, you're tightening your masseters. They're becoming more spastic. That's going to pull back your jaw with the retrognathia, also making your airway more collapsible, right, and increase to obstruction. And so treating OSA alone is not actually giving you the most comprehensive improvement in your sleep, right?
Agreed.
So if he were to just go in and say, okay, I'm going to use the CPAP, I'm using it every night, he may still not have enough improvement in his sleep, because if he's still bruxing, he's going to have sleep fragmentation. And if he's still having insufficient sleep, he's still going to feel tired.
Right. And
Well, I mean,
that's
like
so
I
common.
had braces for like 7 years, right? So it's like at the same time, I need to have some type of retainment device
Sure.
for my teeth or
Sure.
they'll move. So
Sure.
that's another thing where, you know, if my teeth move, I not only have the sleep apnea and the grinding, but I need to keep a retainer in of some sort. So it's like,
Sure.
okay, the Somnomed kind of solved all of those problems because
Sure.
I've worn a retainer since I got braces.
Sure.
So, you know, so if you just use CPAP, well, now you have the grinding, well, you have the teeth movement, you know, and I don't know if that makes a difference because of the jaw structure when your teeth
Definitely.
move.
Definitely.
Well, it's interesting. So when he talked about the experience, and I kind of set it up on a T for a reason, and it's something you taught me, Dr. Ann. He talked about wakefulness. Notice he didn't one time go, well, I slept so great the night I woke up. No, he talked about energy, feeling better during the day, wakefulness.
Sure.
So whatever modality that you choose to use for our audience to treat obstructive sleep apnea, of course, I do work for Somnomed, full disclosure, but whatever one you use, those are the measuring tools. So a physician or a Google will tell you that the goal is subjective.
Yeah.
So if someone with a high AHI that is severe, let's say they're at 52 and they never wear their CPAP, it'll always be 52. But if that person chooses to wear an oral device and it lowers it to 12, we want to get it to 5 or below is what they call perfection, right? Would that be better? Subjectively, yes, because they'll say, I feel better. I'm not grinding my teeth. And so when I was speaking with him and we were first messaging each other, I think through LinkedIn Messenger, one of those, his story was so resonated that it just talked about the subjectivity. I cannot say that enough, and it goes to physicians like you, Dr. Ann, and there are physicians all over the country that I work with that really do that. Number two, mandibular we need to be careful. They called it OAT, right? I call it an oral device. I like to use the word device versus appliance. Appliance reminds me of
So
a
OAT
dishwasher.
stands for oral appliance treatment.
Therapy. But I like to say an oral device because seriously, the best way, and I learned this from one of my mentors, is it's simply just CPR. And I like to ask physicians, have you ever had a CPR class? Because a lot of sleep dentists write this, and they look at me like I'm crazy, but that's the first thing you want to do is clear the airway, lift the chin. For a lot of the oral devices, and especially for the Avant, Dr. Ann, we're just holding it in place. There really isn't a huge advancement because a lot of people think that you walk around like a bulldog, or you're playing a Godfather or something. No, it's not really that. It's just holding in place. And for Robbie's case, what was happening, and we'll get to some therapies that can also help with that, is that I am sure, without even looking or without even Googling, what happened is when he would turn, his jaw would go and everything would block it. And then the thought is, let's put a retainer in there. Well, that's going to block it. Well, now we're pushing air in. Well, that should help it. And so the idea to go, well, wait a second, now we're going to put something else in the mouth that helps. What it's doing is basically just keeping everything in place. And yes, there is some movement.
And I'm a big mouth breather, right?
Yeah,
So I have a backup Somnomed with the fangs.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
I love that you called it that. The herps.
So, yeah, exactly.
Wait,
So-
it's called the herps?
Dorsal fins. It's called the herps device.
The herps. Okay, not the herps.
No.
Because no one wants that in their mouth.
See this?
So like even mine now, I
Right?
sleep with an open mouth, so it's like
Right.
it's not nearly as effective as,
Right.
as the Vaunt because I do sleep with an open mouth, so my jaw still goes
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
I see a huge difference
Right.
Sure.
because the Vaunt actually keeps my mouth
Yeah.
closed.
So a herps
and in
device
place.
has dorsal fins, not fangs. I like that. We're in October. You
Hey,
know,
we're close
but-
to Halloween.
But yeah, what it does is it will help you not go side to side, but you'll open up.
Yeah.
With the Avant, the way it's manufactured, the way it's made, is that it will keep a close fit.
Yeah.
But let's talk about your bruxism and your grinding, dude.
But before we go into
go
that,
ahead.
I just want to make one other comment of that about open mouth breathing, right?
Yep.
So open mouth breathing is something that does actually change the entire character of your face. It can actually cause you to have more maxillary hypoplasia. Many times the reason why we're open mouth breathers is because we don't breathe well through our nose, right? We were just having this conversation earlier about one of the ways that you can even evaluate that for yourself is take a deep breath in through your nose. And what you'll find, and I'm terrible with this, I actually need to get this addressed, is that you see how I have that collapse? It's called alar collapse. That tells me that I have obstruction that
In your
is
nose,
back here, right? And so that could be due to a variety of things. It can be due to polyps. It can be due to a deviated septum. It can be due to adenoidal hypertrophy. The reason I bring that up is because OSA is a multi-level disease, right? And so although I'm very happy to hear about the mandibular advancement device or the OAT that is being utilized, when you're also describing to me that you're a persistent mouth breather, I would encourage further evaluation to be seen by an ENT because there may be other ways to even more fulminantly
right. Even a pharyngometer
manage-
could show you where it's blockage, where all that is.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
But I do agree. I thought you were going with mouth taping. I literally thought that's where you were going.
Oh, with mouth taping, yeah.
Yep.
I mean, what's interesting.
But if you can't breathe through your nose, you better not tape
Exactly.
your mouth.
And so it is really interesting because right now there's a lot of different people coming out about mouth taping
Yep.
and saying that there isn't any literature to support it. And I actually am working with my sleep fellows right now to compose a manuscript doing a review of the literature because there is some literature that
A
is
lot of
making
literature.
that is making suggestion that mouth taping can be beneficial in specific populations. So
Right.
those are one of those things where you could Google it and you can find information that supports it,
Right.
but then being able to partner with whoever you're seeing medically to say, do I fit the right patient profile that I should be doing this, right? So doing mouth taping in isolation without talking to your healthcare partner is not advocated for, but there is clear literature that's demonstrating that there may be benefit, especially if there's not nasal obstruction.
Yeah.
And then
I
there could
meant-
be like a psychological factor, right? Oh, I'm taping
yeah.
my mouth. I feel because I'm, internally like, oh yeah, it's better, but it
Sure.
might not be
Exactly.
medically better at all.
I mean,
It's
Robbie,
kind of
I'm,
like a-
I'm very blessed. I work with a lot of ENTs. And so the ENTs that I work with are like, man, listen, you handle the sleep, you get your sleep people, your sleep dentist, but we'll clear that nose.
yeah.
And because my joke is, why even be on a CPAP if you're not breathing if you can't breathe through your nose?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's start there.
Yeah.
So I'm one of these people that I'm for the right therapy for the right patient.
Right.
Exactly.
Whether it's any of those things.
Yeah, and I can modify your breathing with a CPAP,
absolutely.
right? So if you're a person who normally would need a CPAP of a pressure of 12 or 15, or it's so severe you need a BiPAP, you're at 25 over 20 or something like
Yep.
that. By doing those surgeries, you actually will modify the resistance, and so therefore you won't need as high of a pressure, right?
100%.
And so many times people look at these as one versus the other,
Right.
But you even alluded to it. Sometimes it's complementary therapies.
And I'm a big and guy. Let's talk about your bruxism.
That's the grinding.
I want to
Grinding.
hear something. So you had a conversation with my VP of Sales of North America, Lewis Myers, and what did he tell you? This is all. And Lewis has been with the company 6 years, I think.
Yeah. So I cracked the Avante on all 4 molars.
That is.
He's like, this thing is like rock solid. I've never
I
seen
throw
this ever.
to
And I mean,
show,
I
like-
literally cracked it almost all the way through. Where
Wow.
I mean, it's not effective anymore. It doesn't fit. It's
I mean,
very,
how
very
are
loose.
you like? That is. What'd you say? Bionic
He's
jaw?
like, it's either a defect in the device
Right.
or you have a bionic jaw.
Yeah, and your girlfriend says what?
Yeah,
Yeah,
my
she's
girlfriend's like, yeah, you have a bionic jaw. Just because, I mean, it may just be from being a chef and
Yeah.
clenching
Yeah.
so much
Are you a
because
gum
of the
chewer?
stress. No.
Okay. Because I was going to say that's very common also in gum chewers, right? So
Yeah.
when you look at bruxism, there are definitely certain things that we do during the day that make it more likely to occur at night.
Yeah.
And so gum chewing is one of those. If we're a clencher during the day, we're going to be a clencher at night. Again, what we're doing is we're conditioning those muscles
Yeah.
to perform in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that we do see with obstructive sleep apnea is that you can see it both as a prodrome as well as an effect. So meaning that we brux, and that can contribute to having the sleep apnea event. But we also see the opposite occur as well, that you have the apneic event and then you brux.
Yeah.
So it can go in either direction. And so there is this very, very intimate relationship there. Now, with bruxism, however, in terms of the approach to treatment, most people are going to
Well,
say...
hold on. Do you have pain?
Pain.
Yeah. In
From,
your jaw at
from
all?
bruxing.
So that's why he said about Bionic. Like,
Now
he's
I
not
used
even-
so
headaches?
before the Avante, I had
I love that you call it the
TMJ.
Avante.
What is
Avant.
it?
It's
Avant.
the Avant. But
Avant,
no, I
okay.
like Avante.
I like Avante too. It's like
Yeah,
much
hey,
sexier.
it sounds more.
I think I saw
yeah,
you know,
I like
marketable.
Avante.
You
I
give
think
it
I
your
saw
It
her.
marketing
sounds much
department.
better than the herp.
That's true.
I think I saw Avante dance. Now coming to the stage.
Hey, I'm a marketing consultant for some of it.
Yeah.
Just chef
No,
and multi-talented.
There you
here.
go. So, but no headaches.
I mean, before, when I was just having the
No,
CPAP.
when you're cracking our Avants, nothing.
No.
Uh,
so no
I had
like jaw
clicking.
pain. Oh, you had clicking.
I had
Okay.
clicking before the Somnomed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Before.
And so that's temporomandibular joint dysfunction,
Yeah,
right?
so
and so not all people
he
who
said
have
before.
not
Yeah,
all
I
people
don't
who
have
have
it now.
TMJ have pain. What's interesting is actually when you look at studies of bruxism alone, 80% of people who have bruxism don't actually have a sound associated with it, right?
Right,
So my kids both brux. I'm a bruxer. My husband's a bruxer, right? And
Wouldn't you like to be a Bruxer too?
and my daughter so bad is like her teeth are like this little now. But my son has that bruxism where it's not necessarily persistent, but all of a sudden you're like you hear like
Oh,
I'm like
you
your
can
teeth
hear
are
it?
gonna break, your teeth are gonna break. Like it's like it's the worst noise ever. But what most people will describe is they wake up in the morning and that their jaw hurts. Or
Yeah, it's
their
like tired,
teeth hurt.
right?
Exactly.
See,
Yeah.
that's what I thought you would have, because then I was going to talk about what we talked about before. So there is no pain associated. or
Well, like
headaches.
it's when I would like yawn, right?
Got
And then
it.
it
That
would,
you'd
it
feel
would click down.
and it would move. Yeah.
Yeah, but like the Somnomed would keep, I don't know if it fixed it or realigned my jaw or whatever,
Sometimes, well-
but yeah, it kept me from opening
Yep.
my mouth while I was sleeping.
Yep.
So, I mean, maybe it healed it, the muscle or whatever.
Well, no,
Sure.
it's realigning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what some of the things that's interesting is that so my background is I'm a physician obviously, but I'm specifically a DO, right? An osteopathic physician. And in osteopathic medicine, the only difference between our medical school training is we actually get training in an additional modality called osteopathic manipulative therapy, right? OMT. And so within that, we learn full body manipulation. It's actually something that chiropractics and a lot of physical therapy is based out of. So not only learning the spinal manipulation, but really everywhere, cranial, sacral, knee, the point of my story is that one of the things that we get trained on is temporomandibular joint dysfunction. And so one of the things that we'll ask patients to do is slowly open their mouth, right? And when they slowly open their mouth, what happens is that your jaw, especially people who have bruxism and TMJ, is that it'll actually deviate. So when you
go
do
to
it
one side or the other.
one side or the other, and so
Okay.
generally you are deviating to the side that is more spastic, right? And so when I identify that, some of the strategies that I'll do, I even do it for myself because I get really bad TMJ, I have migraine, etc. I actually have gotten Botox in my masseters to help with it. Is that when you identify, okay, I slowly open and I pull to this side. That means this side is tighter. We then can actually apply some treatments to that. And so one of the things that you can do is you can actually ask the person, push your jaw towards that side, and then you resist against it.
Like
You-
strengthen
So-
part of your
resistance.
jaw.
It's kind of like a facilitated positional release. What that does is it engages that muscle, and as you're pushing this way, I'm pushing this way, it engages it. It actually starts to make it do the opposite effect. It causes it to relax. So you do that, you hold it, and you go hold, 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 hold. You hold it for about 60 seconds, and then you tell them relax, and you tell them to do it again, and you tell them relax, and you tell them to do it again, and then what happens? It actually causes a relaxation there.
Physical therapy.
It basically,
Almost, I
yeah.
was
So
thinking
OMT, physical therapy, chiropractics, a lot of different modalities utilize similar processes, and so this is something that can be really, really very effective. Similarly, because you Brox, right, and maybe it's bilateral, you can do the same thing. Have a person like you can do it to yourself, like hey, yes, right, and you kind of hold down. And use your fingers to try and keep it open, right? And now you do the same thing. You're going to relax those muscles, right? So I think these are some things, again, where you're talking about people who may be listening. They may identify that they're Bruxers. They might be getting into over-the-counter dental devices, which are great. I mean, they're great to use. They just don't have the lifespan, right? They just don't have the lifespan. And so with that, these are other things that people can do tonight, do today, and be able to actually change the disability they're experiencing.
Agree. So outside of cracking the Avant, it's worked great, you said.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like a life changing thing because it seems so simple, right, that it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Like it's like okay, well. You hear like CPAP, and all the nightmares, and you're like, what? There's like a simple solution to this. Why doesn't everybody know about it?
Yeah.
And as I talk to more and more people, I'm like, hey, you heard of SomnoMed? They're like, no. I'm like, you need to.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's just like a new thing or if it's what exactly it is or a marketing thing, but
it really
it's
is
so
a breakdown
effective.
of the world, right?
Yeah.
When we look at the sleep world, and we have this conversation all the time, I've had the privilege of even talking to your CEO, Neil, about this, and the fact that as a sleep medicine physician, our worlds do not intersect with with sleep medicine dentistry. And so again, when you look at the guidelines that we follow, CPAP is the goal therapy. And so we really look at the mandibular advancement devices and oral devices as saying like, we really don't want to use those. But the reality is literature demonstrates that they have a very, very high effective use. And again, going back to your conversation around efficiency, right? If I'm actually utilizing it 100% of the time versus using it 10% of the time, and I may not be getting the same exact AHIs as the outcome, I'd rather someone have 100% of a much lower AHI than 90% of no treatment whatsoever.
Well, think about like a CEO too, right? Like you can't really travel very well with a CPAP.
Yeah.
So they're never going to really use it, and a CEO has so much, weight on them where it's like, okay, well, SomnoMed, just like you said, if you use it 100%, you may be at 80% effectiveness, but the CEO has function at 80% instead of 20%.
Yes.
Think about how much, even from an ROI standpoint of the business or the corporation, how more effective they can be.
Robbie, I need to hire you, by the way, for SomnoMed. But if somebody wants to hire you for what you do, I'm so curious. So obviously I follow you on social media. If I wanted to hire you for an event, I would just go to your handle or your
LinkedIn, or we have
and how does that work? Walk us through talk to our audience. Like if I want to get, you don't have to get specific with prices.
Yeah.
But how does that work?
So we do all like fine dining stuff. So we don't do like big galas or like weddings. So most of our is like 10 to 25 or so, but 5-7 course dinners, all plated, cooked on site. So we're pretty much mostly referral for the most part. So we work for some really cool high-end clients, and that's surprisingly a small group, and then it just spreads. And if you do a really good job, people
somebody
really
who's
enjoy
attending that meal goes.
And we capture multiple cash flows in the sense where there might be a CEO, we do his corporation, we do his board meetings, we do his personal stuff. I sell pots, pans, knives, so we might outfit his kitchen with new pots and pans.
Especially if you're cooking it.
Exactly.
All the time. You're like, this is what I need in order to give you the best meal, right?
Exactly.
We need to have him up to your barn.
Yeah.
Your farmette.
Yes.
And we'll do.
Or we go down to Houston. Let's go to Houston. Road trip.
I'm actually building a new venue that'll be done like early next year. That's like this over the top in memorial
Yep.
luxury venue.
Oh, we're so coming.
Yeah,
That was our
so-
invitation, you heard?
Yeah, exactly. And we have like this.
And we're going to bring the
50-foot
podcast.
Hey, that'd be perfect.
Awesome.
Chef's table style, where
Awesome.
we're cooking in front of you and you're sitting at the island.
Very cool.
And it fits 16 people.
You know,
and it's
because
pretty
that's,
neat.
this is what I do, Robbie, so I apologize. I dropped the ball on this one. We really should have, and Dan even agreed, we should have had it set up at a kitchen.
Yeah.
And you just cook and us talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I promise, I'm going to have you back on, and we're going to have
Oh,
to do
definitely.
that.
Well, we already know. We got
But
got invited.
No. Just I just think it would be cool, just me and you.
Yeah.
Or like
talking to him
even
while he's
have
cooking.
foods
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that
definitely.
you would recommend for better sleep, and we do like
Yes.
a recipe for
Yes.
better, like the better sleep recipe.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, and I think you bring up a really good point, because this was something that I was excited about having a luxury chef on, right? Is that we recognize food plays such a critical role
Huge.
in sleep, right? And so everything from the content of food, like certain foods, like pumpkin
Times.
seeds, for instance, have a very high amount of tryptophan. Tryptophan gets metabolized into being melatonin.
Like
It's the same
turkey.
reason.
Well, that's the.
This is the same reason why after Thanksgiving meal you're
Yep.
more sleepy, right? But
Couldn't
also
be all the drinking I did the night before.
but also
that morning.
the timing of food. We had talked about offline that intermittent fasting is a strategy that has been utilized to be able to phase shift. So basically move your circadian pattern. But also last year at the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, I had done a talk about obesity, sleep, and the microbiome. And so what we had seen there is that people who weren't sleeping well, were on track of generally having an intake of over 1,000 calories more than their age-matched peers who were sleeping appropriately. So we're linked to having higher caloric intake and generally choosing less quality meals. But the inverse is also true. When we're filling our needs, our food needs, with poor quality food that is nutrition like lacking, right? Or nutrition poor, we now are changing the makeup of our microbiome. That change up of our microbiome actually can also introduce your higher likelihood of having other sleep problems. So we just had a whole conversation about OSA.
Yep.
It's been demonstrated that when we get into this cycle and that microbiome has this negative shift, it actually causes you to have more sleep fragmentation and more chronic intermittent hypoxia. And so therefore you're set up for obstructive sleep apnea.
Right.
And then the obstructive sleep apnea further disturbs your microbiome, and it creates this vicious cycle. And this all is rooted in the fact that food is medicine.
I agree.
Right? And so when you have someone like yourself where you have taken food to an art form, you are a physician of food, right? I mean, you essentially take food to...
You can take that one. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll take that one.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about...
Dr. Robbie.
Yeah, when you talk about
like
medicine,
this.
right? We always talk about that there's the
do.
science and art of medicine.
Like the honorary, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I bestow upon you the Sleeping Around the Podcast honorary doctorate degree.
Oh,
And
man, I like it.
you are a chef. You
Do
are
I
the
get, like, a
official.
little frame
You're the official
certificate?
sleeping around
We're
the podcast.
we
chef.
have to make him a frame. We're going to make him a
Yes.
little
Yes.
doctoral degree, a Sleeping Around the Podcast doctoral
Deal.
degree of food is medicine, right?
right.
And the reality is that you are serving a community in a very, very meaningful way.
Robbie, I want people to follow you. And so I know you said your handles, but let's say it again. And then if they want to book you to do one of these private events, can anybody do this, or are you
Yeah.
selective? Okay.
No. Anyone,
As long as
anyone
they
can-
pay.
Yeah. Hey,
yes,
if you
that's
pay,
it.
like, you're good.
So look in this camera, Robbie, and give your best spiel. I definitely want people, guys, he's a great follow, and I can't wait to actually eat your food. But go ahead, Rob. You're going to look into that camera right there.
All right. Sorry, I had
Say
to
what you got.
like take it all in and like
Yeah.
get my 30-second pitch together.
Yeah.
So, really what makes us special is we do in-home, we do on-site, we cook on-site. So, the food is as fresh as possible. So
Sure.
even at a luxury restaurant, they cook, they put in the hot window and they take it out, so 5 minutes
Order
from
up!
cooking. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you're getting ducks, scallops,
Sure.
from cook to plate in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
30 seconds, a minute. So those scallops that are usually overcooked or cold are going to be beautiful and creamy and medium
them.
rare and
I know.
you know, all that. So, you know, that's
definitely need
really
to have
what
him
you
cook
get.
next time.
We focus on like the experience, right? So I talk and I introduce, you know, the meals. We focus on customization.
Sure.
So, you know, if you have a specific thing you like, specific thing you want to taste.
Sure.
I'm very seasonal, so I'm not going to give you strawberries in the winter, you
Sure.
know, because I just don't taste like anything.
Sure.
So it's a very customized to the individual,
Sure.
experiential type dinner. So it's a different type of dining experience.
Do you give guidance on like wine pairings or cocktail pairings or anything like that?
Yeah, we
or-
do craft cocktails, we do
Very
wine, we
cool.
do, you know, really anything.
Anne's there now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's a total experience. And for me, I always tell people the best experience I have ever had. So I got married in
Thank
Las
you.
Vegas. I got married in Las Vegas, and my husband and I, the night after our wedding, we went to Joel Bachon,
Yep.
and we had the 16-course tasting menu with the paired wine, and it was the most incredible experience, right? And so many times people don't think about going out to eat as being an experience,
Right.
but it is one that you really want to be a part of, and I think that's part of the reason why.
And that's a big part of what luxury means in
Yes.
Yes.
the, you know, food industry. I mean,
Yes.
it really is the epitome of hospitality.
Yes. And I think that when you look
community, yeah.
100%, and when you look at the United States, we recognize that 75% of the adult population is overweight or obese, right? And that really tends to be a reflection of the fact that we don't generally take eating or meals as something that is an experience. It's kind of, we have to do it to get to the next thing.
Yeah.
Similar mindset to sleep. I have to do as little of it or not prioritize it because I have all these other things in the
Right,
day.
like sex.
Exactly.
Wait, no, no.
Wait,
no.
you have other things in a day?
No.
No,
sorry.
I'm confused. That's where the herps come from. So don't just make sure you're being highly selective there. Okay. And so I do think that it is really important when you're describing this luxury experience that experience part is really capitalized on.
I mean,
I mean-
we even do mocktail pairings. Like there was
Yes.
a family that did not drink. I mean, we
Right.
fresh squeezed, you know, grapefruit juice, cantaloupe,
Very
infused
cool.
it with herbs like right there, right before.
Love
So
that.
oxidation didn't even occur in the juice
Wow.
when it was being served. So I mean, we even do stuff like that. And like my superpower juice is like a green juice where I put, I mean, it's like 2 heads of romaine and, you know, 3 heads of kale, 3 heads
Sure.
of, you know, spinach. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just so jam packed that it's like,
lots of antioxidants
Exactly.
and flavonoids and things that are
I
going to
mean,
be
even
great.
mental clarity. I mean,
Yeah,
you can
I was just
tell.
going to say great brain health.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I don't do it as much as I should.
Well, none of us do, but Robbie, thank you so much for coming on. I promise you this isn't the last time.
No,
In
definitely
fact, I
not.
could see some kind of reoccurring theme having Dr. Robbie on
Yeah, definitely.
because we'll talk
I
about
like that.
food.
Can I
No,
put
I'm
that
being
on my
serious.
chef
Oh,
jacket?
totally,
Yeah.
totally.
And it was bestowed to you by a doctor. So,
I know.
it was
Exactly.
blessed
Get
and
like
all
a
that.
lab coat chef
I
jacket.
totally, yes. That's what I expect you to wear when we come
Robbie,
out.
hopefully you're enjoying Austin. I know that you came, from Houston to come to our podcast. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
I always end like this. We're going to end on 5 questions. Okay?
Okay.
And so these 5 questions are just random questions.
Okay.
And they're going to tell us a little bit about you, though.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a random generator right now.
All right.
Go ahead.
And so I believe your girlfriend's listening in, so this ought to
She
be
is.
even more interesting. So I'll look to her to see if you're telling the truth.
Okay.
Fair point.
Hey, that works.
All right. First question. There's 2 type of people in this world.
Okay.
All right. So are you a sock, shoe? Or are you a sock, shoe guy?
Sock, shoes.
When you put on your socks and shoes, do you put both socks on first?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa. You do what?
Both socks and then both shoes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the question?
Yeah. No. Yeah.
So
exactly.
you go
Gotcha.
sock,
Shoe.
shoe.
Yes.
Now, if you would have been a sock, shoe person, we would probably escort you out of here because you'd be a
We have
sociopath.
taken away your
kidding.
doctoral degree.
I'm just kidding.
We have
Just
taken it
kidding. Go
away.
ahead.
All right. Are you a cuddle? I was going to ask that one, but I'm doing this
I'll
instead.
take it
Okay.
from there.
A cuddler and sleep cuddling, or are you a cuddler and roll away because I need my own space?
Cuddler and roll away. I have to sleep on my side.
Yeah.
On my left side.
Okay.
Have to.
All right, we'll get
so
there.
like Mandy sleeps on the right side, so it kind of makes it. We've had a conversation about should we like switch sides? So
Yeah, we
can
could face each other.
Yeah.
But then it's like hot breath in each other's face.
Yeah,
It's not a good look.
There is something about
Yeah,
butt rubbing.
yeah.
A little butt rubbing.
Yeah, she's always has to have her leg like
Touching.
on me.
Oh, I
if
love that.
You know, but if I'm the other side,
I love
and
that.
I'm turned over, she's like, okay, that's
Yeah.
cool.
No,
All
I'm
right.
at the phase in our marriage where it's like I'm just surrounded by pillows and my husband like
And dogs and
my
kids
husband's
and
hand is like where are you in here? Is that you? I'm like, no, that's a pillow, but you can touch that.
Yeah. And if you touch that other pillow, okay, Robbie, are you a top or a bottom when it comes to bunk beds?
Oh, top, 100%. I like the adventure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Top.
I love how everyone like pauses, there's like a really deep breath.
I like it when you ask it usually. All right. You're up.
We had someone else on earlier, and I had asked that, and I don't even know how many shades of red that they turned. All right.
Oh, I was prepared. I was prepared for whatever.
All right.
All right. Big spoon or little spoon?
Big spoon.
Big spoon. Okay.
But what are they if they face away from each other? Is that what is that? What is the salad
butts?
claw thing? What are we,
Spoon? No, that wouldn't
Well,
be.
it's like big spoon and then like spoon butts.
spoon butts.
Yeah, so
butts.
it's like a
Spoon
two-faced
butts.
I
situation.
love that. They
Yeah.
opened up for
They would be like,
Motley Crue.
You'd be
Spoon
able to
butts.
do like some music though with it.
That's
Put your
right.
finger in it.
Well, I always put on music when I go to bed for an hour.
Okay.
Well,
So, like
my last
classical
question.
music.
That was my last question.
Yep.
When you sleep, do you use noise? Do you have to have it silent? Do you have to have it pitch black? Do you have a night light?
I'm extremely sensitive to light. I
Okay.
cannot sleep if there's light like going on.
So do you wear like a mask or?
No,
it's
just dark. I
Okay.
mean, in reason, actually, my alarm clock, the Sonos goes off and the automatic light goes off, and I'm like up.
Okay.
If I see light, I'm up.
Got it.
But if I didn't have a light, I'd be like, oh, that's snoozed. So
Got it.
Really?
Got it.
Yeah.
So I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we're wearing our chef attire right now, right? In terms of sleep, do we have certain jammies? Is it shorts, t-shirts?
Butt
Are we a
naked.
Nude? Are we a nude sleeper?
we're an underwear sleeper.
An underwear sleeper.
Okay.
I get so hot. Like
So I'm
I am
naked.
just naturally just like burning up. I mean, I even made this device that air conditioned the sheets. Like I literally like mobile air conditioner.
Well,
There actually is a
pipe.
device.
there's an awesome
There
device.
actually is a device.
I've
It's called
seen
the
it,
chill-
and I decided to make my own because that one
Well-
only circulates air, and I wanted to like air condition it.
Look at you, and she's over there laughing. She's like, "I freeze my ass off."
Yeah, she woke up and she's like,
She's like,
glacier.
Get this. Yeah, I got you. Robbie, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
I was anxious. I was going to try to meet him before the podcast, but I like meeting.
Yeah,
They,
it actually is really fun.
it was.
I know Dan wants us to really prep and like have a plan, but
gets so upset with us.
we're so bad with plans.
When you're like a demo chef, like, and I'm with the appliance industry, so sometimes you're like, oh, well, they said this oven was live, and oh, I only have like one burner, so you
Yeah.
just gotta like adapt.
100%.
Like, oh, we're all good.
Well,
So-
I got some plans for you, Robbie. Not only with SomnoMed,
Yeah.
but also with Sleep Around the podcast. So from now on, it's Dr. Robbie, luxury chef.
Yes.
Thank you for sleeping around with Dr. Ann and Matthew, and
We're just keeping it between sleep friends.
do love you, Dan. All right.